Welcome to the Catholic Midlife Podcast, where we're addressing the challenges and the opportunities of midlife from a uniquely Catholic perspective. Join us each week as we spark a midlife renewal and create a firm foundation for the next wonderful, exciting, awesome season of life.
Hello and welcome to the Catholic Midlife Podcast. It's great to be here with you today. And we want to thank our listeners, Don and Linda, for leaving a review and a comment on Apple Podcast platform. They say, Curtis and Karen, thanks for all the great descriptions about the messy middle, especially the kitchen remodel example. We can definitely see why it is sometimes our nature to avoid transitions, and particularly the messy middle, by just staying in the rut we are in. Looking forward to make more great conversations from you both. Don and Linda, thank you so much, and we are looking forward to continuing the conversation with you. And we covered transitions starting in episode 2. We have a season there, and it's definitely a popular topic. So I'm Curtis, and I'm here with my fellow host, Karen.
Hi, everyone.
So welcome, Karen. And I'm really excited about our new season. We're going to talk about relating to your young adult children.
I'm excited also. This is going to be really awesome. It's one of our most requested topics, and it's very popular. If you're midlife and you have young adults, it's an issue for you. You're relating to your young adult. You know there's going to be changes, and how should they change? What are you trying to develop there? And there's obviously that big tension between what you let go of, what you release control of, and what do you still support for your young adult. There's this tension in that transition phase.
Yeah, Karen. So this is the kind of topic where the wives are getting their husbands to listen.
Yes.
Yeah. And they're
Exactly.
discussing it and they're saying, I wish we would have started this years ago. And no wonder there's questions we're going to talk about, like how should relationships change? And what principles are going to serve you now? What do you need to know? What are some traps? We're going to cover all that in this season. So
It'll take us a few episodes. So stay tuned. Stay with us. Awesome. So Curtis, can we share with our listeners what's going on with the kid? What's going on with your young adult when they're 18 to 25?
yeah, sure. So a little bit of perspective. There's this reality we have to accept. It's this age 18 to 30. And the sooner we accept it, the better. And Karen, we've gone through our own acceptance process.
Have.
Yeah,
Definitely.
Look, life ain't what it used to be. And in a lot of ways, my expectations are conditioned by my parents' expectations. And that's just crazy because the culture is not what it used to be. Life is less orderly. There's less predictability. There's more change in your 20s, changing jobs. There's not so much job security anymore. It's more about skills security. People are settling down later. They're getting married later. They're having kids later. It takes longer to reach those milestones where we know, hey, I'm an adult now. I'm doing the adulting thing. And that's how it is.
Yeah. It's just taking longer and it looks different. And I think part of what we're saying here is foundationally, we have to accept that. And if we're continuing to tell ourselves, well, but this is how it was for me, and this is how it should be for my kid, we'll be continually frustrated. So there's some level of acceptance around the changing situation.
Yeah, absolutely. They're not that there's a different set of expectations.
Right.
Or at least we have to be flexible in what's realistic for us to expect.
Right. Exactly. So I think there's a couple of things that are going on. One is what you've talked about, Curtis, sort of this cultural, the cultural factors that influence how your kid's going to develop and emerge into adulthood. And a lot of people are actually calling this phase from 18 to 25 or 30 a new phase of development. They call it emerging adulthood. And it's more of it's more of something we observe in developed countries, in places where there's this longer phase between starting to enter your 20s and then really feeling settled in life and finding your place.
Yeah, it's not just the US, it's not just the UK. It's observed in these more developed economies.
Right.
And there's lots of drivers for it, but it's not just our little corner of the world here.
Mm-hmm. So there's the cultural elements, but also there's this biological element of brain development. And it's been heavily proven that the young adult's brain is still developing in their 20s and throughout their 20s. And particularly, this won't be a surprise for you, particularly the part of the brain that controls executive functioning, like calibrating risk and reward, problem solving, thinking ahead, long-term planning, being able to evaluate themselves and have the self-reflection and self-knowledge. And even still, emotional regulation is developing in the brain. So recognizing this, I think, can really help us both set realistic expectations and help us as we make decisions about the support that our young adults need and the responsibility they need to take for themselves.
Yeah, flexibility is so important in our relationship with others, and grasping that there's still a lot of maturing happening
Right.
is important. You know, Karen, we were out of town for a week, and we came back, and our young adults had cleaned the house. They cleaned the kitchen, they mowed the lawn,
They made dinner for us.
made dinner.
That was new. That had never happened before.
Yeah, it was just amazing, and it would not have happened a year ago.
I think this is a really great point, Curtis, that sometimes in this phase with our young adults, we can be really frustrated because we're seeing the weaknesses and the places where they haven't developed and the responsibility that they're not taking. And likely there's also significant progress from, year to year or over time. And it's really important to recognize and acknowledge and affirm that progress. We've I think talked about this on the podcast before, or if we haven't, we will. But your brain has a negativity bias. It's going to see what you perceive as negative, something you need to do something about. So intentionally looking for the growth and the strength and the progress just can give us a more realistic perspective about how our kids are developing.
Yeah, and in any relationship, we need reinforcement. We
Right.
want to hear the positive. We want to
Mhm.
have our work and effort and sacrifices acknowledged,
Right.
and that's human nature. And our kids are humans.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's very motivating and empowering as well when we have our growth and our progress acknowledged and validated for us.
Yeah, at the same time, the relationship is in transition. They are
Mhm.
indeed becoming adults.
Right.
And there's a certain amount of ping-ponging, but depending on the age and the situation and so forth, but there's ping-ponging from wanting your help, wanting to be dependent, back to wanting independence, being responsible, acting responsibly. And we're always trying to figure out how they're approaching us,
Right.
or how we need to shift the conversation to fill those roles.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my goodness. It reminds me of this cartoon I ran across. This must have been about a year ago. And there's this girl and she's talking with her friend and she says something like, I'm at that point in life where I don't want my parents to tell me what to do, but I still want to blame them for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I want the responsibility, but I don't want the responsibility. And that's the tension of emerging adulthood.
Well, isn't it your fault, mom, as the mom?
Oh no. I already feel guilty all the time. So thinking that it just makes it worse. And I think what Curtis is pointing out here is, okay, this is for the moms, right? We are going to have the mom guilt negativity bias, right? We're going to see all the places where we think we should have done this, we could have done this, we failed here, and we can be consumed by guilt for our kids' experiences and outcomes. And so really part of working through this transitional phase for many moms is learning to release the guilt and release the sense of responsibility for the outcomes that our kids are getting.
Yeah. So you have a mom, you have mom guilt. It's essentially universal. And this is actually a big topic about how to work with it and through it and how not to burden your kids with it.
Right.
But you touched on this point of shifting into a new mode where as parents, as moms, as dads, we are not accepting responsibility for their outcomes. We're not accepting responsibility for how they are experiencing their lives. This is a critical transition in our relationship.
Yeah, it really is, Curtis. And part of this transition is we are moving away from this, other kind of control and oversight we have when they're still teenagers, when they're still in our homes. And we're moving away from that control. And another whole conversation would be, did we even have control in the first place? It can be an illusion that we tell ourselves to make us feel more in control. But we're moving away from that. We're building this new kind of relationship of mutual respect and influence. So yes, we are parents. We have influence. We have a role, but moving away from taking on this particularly emotional responsibility for the kinds of outcomes and experiences that our kids are having. That can be a trap.
Yeah. So if we're not responsible for their outcomes, and that's our word, meaning the results, getting the good grade at college, graduating from the awesome mechanic school with bright future, getting the first job, the outcomes, what is it we should be, what principles might come into play for us?
Right. So I like this question because we can have a lot of goals around our kids, right? Goals for, as you said, what they'll achieve, what they'll experience, for their own milestones. We can have goals about the family and how we're relating, and goals for our own relationship with our kid. And ultimately, our prize, our number one goal with our young adults is we want to create a healthy and loving relationship with our adult children. We want to create a healthy and loving relationship because we're in it for the long haul, right? We've got a lot of years ahead of us, and we're looking for this more mutual kind of relationship.
Yeah. If you want to influence your children, you better have a good relationship, or else you're not going to influence them, and that they'll probably start doing what you don't want.
Yeah. And I remember this woman who sent me a little email after a talk I gave. And she said, that was really helpful for me because I recognized, yes, I was invested in this relationship and I did want a healthy and loving relationship. And also I had all these other competing goals. And it just helped me to prioritize my goals and fix my eyes on where I'm going and where I want to be with this kid when they're a full adult.
It's really hard. Our children are going to suffer.
Mm.
They're going to make some choices that are better than others. They're going to have difficulties in life. This is the reality of the world. And if we can have a great relationship with them, or the best relationship that's possible, then that's how we can support them. That's how we can best support them.
And it won't be the same as the relationship we had before. Again, there's has to be a certain amount of acceptance around the new kind of relationship that we're moving into. So one thing I want to mention is there are a couple of virtues that are super appropriate and helpful, I believe, in this particular season of parenting. And the one I just really love is prudence. Prudence is something you really want to cultivate in this season because there's all of these really unknown situations that you're probably going to have to deal with, things that you don't expect, maybe things you don't like about your kids' outcomes and experiences and situations. And prudence is this capacity to take in all the information, the environmental situational information, the relationship information, the information about your kids and their strengths and weaknesses, the information about your own patterns of relating. Just take all that in and make the best decision for you about how you're showing up, what you're choosing to do or not do in the relationship, how you're communicating with your young adult, how you're supporting them or how you're stepping back. It's pulling all that in and making the prudent decision for you.
Well, Karen, prudence, it's sort of like that catch-all
Mhm.
virtue. Like, hey, I'm thinking about this new business venture. Oh, great. Well, you should go for it as long as it's prudent.
Mm.
That's almost like non-advice. And you're right. Prudence is one of those crown jewel kinds of virtues. I think one perspective is, look, you're dealing with these young adults. Try to keep stepping back. Try to keep panning out to look at the bigger picture. How is all this connected? What about my long-term goals? What about the relationship? What is going to make sense in the longer run and the bigger picture? And that, I think that's helpful for rummaging around to try to find some prudence in
Right.
these situations, which are complex and difficult.
They are complex and difficult, and they're very individual. And I think sometimes we think, oh, I'm going to go figure out what to do, and I'm going to ask other people, what
Mm-hmm.
should I do? Tell me what to do.
Yeah.
And advice gathering, it can be a very helpful part of a decision-making process. And, sometimes we want to give up the burden of the responsibility of making the decision. We just want somebody else to tell us what to do.
Please just tell me what to do.
I've been there. I remember with one child being very upset because I wasn't sure what to do and nobody would tell me what to do. And eventually I had this revelation of nobody's going to tell you what to do and nobody should tell you what to do because that's your job. And it's a burden and it's a responsibility and it can be extremely challenging, but also it gave me a lot of insight into my role and stepping into that role and the responsibility that I had.
Karen, that was a big evolution
Mm-hmm.
in our life.
Mm.
So let me just move on. That's thanks for sharing that. This touches on the issue of control, and we
Mm.
mentioned this already, but really, it's really true that we have to keep reminding ourselves that we can't accept responsibility for what we can't control.
Right.
And we can accept responsibility for trying to influence a situation
Yeah.
as powerfully, as positively as we can. And we can accept responsibility for trying to preserve and maintain the relationship.
Right.
And we'll probably talk about conflict and how to approach that
Hmm.
in a way that hopefully preserves the relationship, but still accepting responsibility for what you're responsible for, but not beyond that. It's
Right.
really central to navigating this transition.
Exactly. Exactly. I think that's a great point.
Yeah. So, one thing to bear in mind in the midst of all of this is to remember that your kids love you.
They do. They really do.
They really do.
Yeah. And sometimes we don't see it or we don't perceive it or experience it the way that we would like to. And they're developing, they probably don't exactly know how to articulate that in a new kind of relationship. And the people who have really talked to young adults, regardless of whether your relationship is thriving or whether it's struggling right now, your kids do love you and they want a healthy, loving relationship with you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a central drive in the
Right.
human person. We love our parents. We want to have a great relationship with them. We would love it if when they let us be adults, right?
Right. Right.
And that's what our kids want to do also. And we're going to try to facilitate that as they ping pong back and forth between being super responsible and making less than great choices sometimes.
Awesome. Yep. So here's what you can look forward to in our coming episodes. We're going to expand on this topic and dive a little deeper about communicating with your young adult, listening to your young adult, working through conflict issues in a loving and healthy way, how to support that relationship in the midst even of some struggles or difficult times.
I'm really looking forward to that. So I'll leave you with this, that your goal is to create a healthy and loving relationship with your adult children. And they do love you.
Great. So we're wrapping up here. And as we do, we'll just let you know that this is a topic that Kirsten and I give presentations and workshops on. It's one of our most requested topics. If it's an area of interest for you, if you know a group or a community that could benefit from this information as you listen to our episodes, please reach out to us at thecatholicmidlife@gmail.com and we can answer any questions you have. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much for listening to the Catholic Midlife podcast. It's great to be here with you. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite app or platform. Leave a review that's so helpful so that others like you can find the podcast. And be sure to tell your friends. We'll see you next week.